Okay, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to this month's Patch Tuesday webinar by Manage Engine. Here's a quick info about me, an intro. I am Anupam Kundu, a product specialist at Manage Engine, and today I'll be your presenter. I'm also assisted by an expert panel who would be answering all your queries throughout the webinar. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any queries regarding the presentation or the webinar or any of our products, please feel free to ask via chat. Now, this is going to be a quick 45-minute session wherein we'll be discussing all the details about the Patch Tuesday updates for July 2022. Followed by this, we'll have a question and answer session wherein our expert panel would be answering all your queries. So let's take a look at the agenda of today's webinar. At first, we'll discuss the latest cybersecurity news that made the headlines across the world. Following that, we'll have a detailed breakdown of July 2022's Patch Tuesday updates by Microsoft. After that, we'll be talking about the impacts and the effects that missing these patches can have on the systems. And then we'll be sharing some of the best practices for managing patches in a hybrid network. Last of all, but certainly not the least, we'll have a question and answer session wherein our expert panel would be answering all your queries. So let's begin with the cybersecurity news. So the first news tells us that a ChromeLoader malware has been found in the open that is hijacking browsers. The cybersecurity researchers have discovered an information stealing malware that has been dubbed as ChromeLoader. So since early this year, the activities related to this malware have shown a steep increase. Now, speaking of the malware, this ChromeLoader is a rogue Chrome browser extension which is typically being distributed as ISO or DMG file downloads in paper install sites on Twitter and free gaming and movie sites as QR codes. I repeat that this malware is being distributed as ISO or DMG file downloads in paper install sites, Twitter, and free gaming and movie sites. So the malware can capture users' search engine queries on Google, Yahoo, and Bing, and also can request invasive permissions to access browser data and can manipulate web requests. Now, furthermore, it redirects the victims away from the Chrome extensions page to prevent them from attempting to remove the add-on. Now, the Chrome loader has also been codenamed as ChosIOC loader and Chromeback by the broader cybersecurity community. The researchers have also detected a macOS version of this malware that works against both Chrome and Safari browsers, effectively turning this Chrome loader malware into a cross-platform threat. Moving on to the next vulnerability, I hope most of us remember about the MSDT zero-day vulnerability dubbed as Follina. So reports of a new phishing campaign exploiting the Follina vulnerability have come up. As I already mentioned, the Follina was a zero-day vulnerability in Microsoft Windows support diagnostic tool and is tracked by CVE 2022-30190. Now, recently, new phishing campaigns are targeting this vulnerability to deploy the Rosanna backdoor malware. I repeat, to deploy the Rosanna backdoor malware in Windows systems, which has remote shell injection capability. Now, threat actors are making use of an Office document and MS Office document that contains a Discord CDN URL. So now, once the document is downloaded and opened, that is, the link is clicked, and once a successful connection is established, the next stage payloads are downloaded, which include the Rosanna implant itself, as well as a batch file that ends the Microsoft Windows support diagnostic tool processes. So researchers have claimed that Rosanna eventually allows the attackers to take over the system via shellcode injection. Hence, it is highly recommended to patch the vulnerability if you haven't yet, and also to take precautionary steps against phishing emails. With that, we come to the end of the cybersecurity news. Let's now discuss about Microsoft support and the Windows lifecycle. So, dear guests, as you can see on your screens, that the active support and the security support for Windows 10 version 1909 for enterprise and education, and for Windows 10 version 20H2 for home, pro, and pro for workstations is going to end on the 10th of, has already ended, I beg your pardon, has already ended on the 10th of May 2022. So users who are still on these old versions kindly migrate to newer versions such as Windows 10 version 21H1 and Windows 11. Now, let's talk about the 0 day that has been patched this month. Only one 0 day, luckily for us, for all of us. So the 0 day has been found in CSRSS or client server runtime subsystem. Now, this is an elevation of privilege vulnerability and has been tracked by CVE 2022-22047. To note that this is not yet publicly disclosed, but the vulnerability is being actively exploited. Now, as per Microsoft's security advisory, an attacker who successfully exploited this vulnerability could gain system privileges. And the vulnerability was internally discovered by MSTIC or Microsoft Threat Intelligence Center and MSRC, which is the acronym for Microsoft Security Response Center. Now let's discuss about the 4 critical vulnerabilities that have been patched this month. So we see that all 4 of these critical vulnerabilities are found in Microsoft Windows and that these can cause remote code execution if left unpatched. Now the vulnerabilities have been pushed to the users as monthly rollups. All of this information is also available in Manage Engine's Patch Tuesday blog as well as forum posts. Taking a look at the Patch Tuesday updates breakdown for July 2022, we see that a total of 84 vulnerabilities have been patched using 106 patches and 17 updates. Also do note that these 84 vulnerabilities can cause 6 different impacts on the vulnerable systems, that is on the systems that have been left unpatched. Speaking about the total number of patches that have been released in July 2022 altogether, we see that a whopping 756 of these patches are supported by Manage Engine's patch management solutions, that is Endpoint Central, Patch Manager Plus, and Vulnerability Manager Plus. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a look at the operating systems and the applications that are affected. So we see vulnerabilities in 63 different vulnerabilities in Windows and a few in Microsoft Office. Talking about the patches by impact, as we already discussed, the vulnerabilities can have 6 different kinds of impact, starting with 26 vulnerabilities that can cause elevation of privilege, while 10 causing information disclosure, 10 causing remote code execution, and the others causing security feature bypass, tampering, and denial of service. Here's a look at the patches by severity. So we can see that a total of 92.3% of the patches released this month have been treated as important, while 7.7% of these have been rated as critical. So for admins out there, we already know that there's no time to be left, and then we have to patch the vulnerabilities as soon as possible. Now discussing about the operating systems and the applications patched, we see just 2, that is Microsoft Windows and Office. Let's take a look at the Microsoft Windows patches. So the patches, the vulnerabilities have been classified as critical, moderate, and important. And the failure to patch these vulnerabilities can cause remote code execution, elevation of privilege, information disclosure, security feature bypass, and denial of service. Taking a look at the CVE IDs for the Microsoft Windows vulnerabilities. So we see the ones that have been highlighted are the critical ones. I'll pause for a while so that you guys can take a note of it or a screenshot. Moving on to the second slide. We see 23 other CVE IDs with CVE 2022 30221 being a critical vulnerability. Also, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to reiterate that all of this information is available in Manage Engine's Patch Tuesday forum post. Now, talking about the Microsoft Office vulnerabilities, so we see that there are two CVE IDs that have been released, that is CVE 2022 33632 and 33633. The failure to patch these vulnerabilities can cause remote code execution and security feature bypass in the vulnerable systems. Now let's take a look at the third-party updates for Windows. We see some major vendors releasing updates this month. We have Cisco, then we have VMware as well, Foxit Reader. You can take a note of it. I'll pause for a while all of this information is available in Manage Engine's Patch Tuesday forum. Moving on, we see some other major updates from Adobe, Foxit, as well as Microsoft Visual Studio Code, Cisco. Here's a look at the third-party updates that have been released for Mac. We see updates from major vendors like Skype, Microsoft, as well as Adobe again. Speaking of the non-security office updates, we see updates for only two, only two updates for non-security field, that is Microsoft Office 2016, and we have mentioned the related KBs right in the brackets. Now, as you can see from the graph on the screen, it clearly depicts the steep rise in vulnerabilities each year. So as we can see, there are a total of 10,409 vulnerabilities were reported till the July of 2020. Such an alarming rise in vulnerabilities only iterates the dire need for patching to protect the endpoints in a network. So with that being said, let's take a look at the best practices for patching in a hybrid network. So the first step, that is the first best practice, is to always test the patches before deploying them. Now, as a thumb rule, always test the patches in a test group, that is a pilot group of endpoints, before you deploy them to your production machines. Now, ideally, the pilot group should have all the endpoints of the various operating systems and flavors that you are using in your network. So once the patches have been tested and approved, only can they be then deployed to your production machines. Number second would be to always prioritize the security and the critical updates for all the machines. Now, all other updates, such as the optional updates, the less severe updates, all of these can be sent for deployment, as in all of these can be deployed based on regular deployment schedules. But make sure that the security and critical updates are always prioritized at first. Number third, always try to synchronize the patching schedules with monthly patch Tuesdays. So we know that there are different kinds of splits for patch Tuesdays that different organizations follow. One is the regular split, wherein we list the weeks based on the first week, second week, or the third week of the month, and also the days. In that note, I'd also like to tell you that Manage Engine's Patch Management Solutions provides an exclusive Patch Tuesday based split, about which we'll discuss in the next few slides. So by syncing the patching schedules with the monthly Patch Tuesday updates, you can ensure that the patches are tested, approved, and deployed as soon as they are released. So this gives you a head start for achieving patch compliance in your networks. Number four, as we all know, always set broad deployment windows for the remote machines and try to choose non-business hours for the office machines, especially servers. And last but not the least, it is highly recommended to allow the users to postpone the deployments and the reboots. Now, many a time, what happens is that users in every organization, or let's say users in your organization, are held up with some business critical tasks. So forcing a deployment or a reboot on their systems will eventually lead productivity drops. And as IT admins, we definitely don't want that. In that case, it is highly recommended that users are given the choice to postpone the deployments and the reboots. With that, we're done with the best practices that we can follow for patching in a hybrid network, hybrid environment. Now, let's take a look at deploying these patches and updates using Patch Manager Plus. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you are using Endpoint Central or Vulnerability Manager Plus, there's nothing to worry about, as you can still deploy the patches seamlessly because all of Manage Engine's patch management solutions have the same features in the patch management module. First, as I mentioned earlier, always test the patches in a pilot group of systems before they're deployed to the production machines. So let's take a look at the testing and the approval of the patches through Patch Manager Plus's console. Let's go to the console. So this is Manage Engine Patch Manager Plus, and I'm using the version 10.1.2138.15. This is how the homepage looks. We have the network patch status, the system health graph, the missing patches by severity and by vulnerability. On the right side of the screen, you can see a list of the latest security news, which has been linked to Manage Engine's Patch Tuesday Manage Engine's blog page as well as Manage Engine's forum posts. On clicking this, you'll be redirected to the Manage Engine's Patch Tuesday forum post. You can also get all of the latest security news right from here. So let's get ahead with the test and approval feature. So for that, we'll click on deployment from the top menu, and then we'll click on test and approve from the left pane. So as you can see, these test groups have already been created. Let's go ahead and create a new group. We'll click on the add group button. Now the first task is to choose the platform. As you can see that we support 3 different platforms, that is Windows, Mac, and Linux. We'll be going with Windows, and then we'll choose the group. If you have already created a test group, you can just simply select them from the drop-down menu, or you can create a new group. Let's create a new group by clicking on Create Custom Groups. So once the window loads up, you can see the custom groups that have already been created. Let's go ahead and create a new group. Click on the Create New Group button. Now, first task, as always, is to select a group name. Let's go ahead with a nice name that would be July PT. Let's give the year also 2022. All right. You can add in a description if you want. Next, you'll have to choose the category for the group. We have 3 different categories: static, static unique, and dynamic. First, let's discuss what happens if we choose a dynamic group. As we click on dynamic, you can see that a list of a set of criteria pops up. So select the criteria from here. Let's go with operating system equals, and we'll select Windows. If I click on save, what happens is that a dynamic group will be created, and the base and the criteria of the dynamic group would be that operating system equals Microsoft Windows 10. So what happens here? So in case any Windows 10 endpoint gets added to the network, the organization's network, it is automatically added as a part of the custom group. And we definitely don't want that to happen to our test groups. So for that, we'll stick to static or static. Let's go with static. Next, we'll be adding the computers, selecting Windows endpoints right from here. And then we'll click on save. As you can see, our test group has been created successfully, and we named it as July PT 2020. Okay. So let's go ahead with creating the automate patch deployment task. We'll click on deployment from the top menu, and then we'll click on, sorry, I beg your pardon. Let's go ahead with the test and approve feature. So we'll click on the deployment from the top menu, and we'll click on test and approve. All right. So test groups will create a new group by clicking on add group. Then we select platform as Windows, and the group name we'll be selecting as the one that we have just created. It was July PT 2022. Let's go with it. Now the next step is to choose the deployment option. So as you can see, we support Microsoft updates, third-party updates, antivirus updates, as well as driver updates. So we'll select the updates from Microsoft based on their severities, going with critical and important ones. right? For demo purposes, you can obviously go as per your requirements, and then we'll do the same for the third-party updates. Here is a list of the antivirus updates that we support. The antivirus updates and driver updates, do note, that are available only for the Windows machines. All done. Now let's select the deployment criteria. So if you put in here any n number of day, this means that if I go with 3, I choose to deploy the patches after 3 days from vendor release. Now select a deployment policy. You can select one right from here, or you can create a new deployment policy by clicking on the create or modify policy. Let's go with this June PD 2022. The next step is to choose the notification settings, and do note that this is an optional setting. So if you want the notifications to be enabled for the test and approve feature, just click on the checkbox and then put in the email addresses wherein you would like to be notified. And if you have already configured the Patch Manager Plus mobile application, then you have to just select the technicians from right here, and the technicians will be notified via the mobile application. And now lastly, we have come to the approval mode for the tested patches. Let's say you want the patches to be tested and automatically approved. So once the patches have been tested, these will be automatically approved only if you click on the checkbox and put in the number of days. Let's go with 2. So this means that the patches that have been tested will automatically be approved after 2 days. Click on create, and as we can see that our automate patch, our test and approve group has been created successfully. Let's go back to the console. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's discuss the automate patch deployment feature, and then we'll create deployment policies based on the patch Tuesday split. Let's get back to the console again. To create our automate patch deployment task, we'll first click on the deployment option from the top menu. Before we proceed, I would like to tell you all that creation of an automate patch deployment task is a 2-step process. The first step is to choose a deployment policy or to create a deployment policy. And then the last step would be to associate an automate patch deployment task with the deployment policy. So let's go ahead with the first task. That is, the first step is to create a deployment policy. We'll click on deployment policies from the left menu, and then we'll click on create policy. As you can see, a lot of policies, deployment policies have been created right here. Clicking on create policy to create a new deployment policy. Let's rename it. We'll put it as, let's say, policy, and add in a description right here if you want. Then we'll click on save. Now the first task is to choose the weekly split type. So as you can see, we offer 2 different features for splits. That is the regular split and the based on patch Tuesday split. Let's go ahead with the regular split at first. So I'm clicking on and selecting the regular split. You can see that the weeks have been listed based on the first, second, third, and fourth, as well as the last. You can also select in the number of days from here. We can put in the deployment windows time, as in we'd like to keep this as broad as possible for seamless deployment. You can add more than one schedule by clicking on the add more schedules. Now, let's talk about Manage Engine's exclusive feature that is based on Patch Tuesday split. For that, once we click on the based on Patch Tuesday split, we'll see that the weeks have been listed as and based on Patch Tuesday. We'll leave the first week for Patch Tuesday's deployment, that is testing and approval of the patches in the first week, that is the Patch Tuesday week. We'll select the other weeks. Let's go with first, second, and third for deployment. We'll select in the days as well. You can add more schedules by clicking on the add more schedules, but let's select the time at first. Deployment window. Go with this. Right. Okay. Now the next step is to choose how you want the patches to be to be downloaded from the server to the agent. So if you want the patches to be downloaded from the server to agent only during the deployment window, you can click on the first option. Or if you want the patches to be downloaded anytime the agent contacts the server, we'll go ahead with the second option. And the last step is to choose the initiation of deployment either at the system startup or the refresh cycle, that is the 90-minute refresh cycle, or either of these, whichever happens earlier. Let's click on save and continue, and we come to the second step of creation of a deployment policy, that is the pre-deployment activities. So as the name suggests, pre-deployment activities are nothing but a set of activities that you want to be performed on the endpoints before deployment is about to happen. So we support three different kinds of pre-deployment activities, that is wake on LAN, pre-deployment reboot, as well as an exclusive custom script feature. We'll come to it later, but first let's select the wake on LAN feature. Now, what is this custom script option that's exclusive to Manage Engine's patch management solutions? Clicking on custom script, what happens is that, let's say before the deployment happens on your endpoints, you want certain custom applications such as the closure, as in the termination of a program running in the endpoints, to be done before the deployment happens. So for that, you can create a custom script and then just add it to the script repository. Once done, you can just add the script right from here. You can choose the dependency files as well as specify the exit code, and then we can click on save and continue. Now we don't have any custom scripts. So let's submit this option, and then we'll move on to the third step, that is the pre-deployment user notification. So in case you want the users to be notified about the deployment, just click on the checkbox and then you'll put in custom messages right here. You can also configure the notification timeout, that is custom uh, notification timeout, which has been set to 5 minutes as default. If you want the users to skip the deployment, that is, if you want the allows users to have the skip deployment option, you can just click on this checkbox, and then you can choose to force deploy the patches after a number of days from the day the user has skipped. And also, if you want the deployment progress to be shown on the client systems, just click on this checkbox. Well done. We click on save and continue, and we come to the last step, that is the post deployment activities. So if you want certain app tasks to be performed on the endpoints after the deployment has happened, you can configure right from the post deployment activities. To go with post reboot and shutdown, you can also add Manage Engine's exclusive custom script option. So if you choose the post reboot or shutdown, we offer two different features, that is either reboot or shutdown. You can either choose to force reboot the systems, or you can choose to delay the reboots. Now you can also put in custom messages before the reboot is going to happen. And if you choose, that is, if you want to exclude the reboot for certain machines, such as servers, you can just click on these checkboxes. Click on save and continue, and this is a gist of the deployment policy. So as you can see, this is the policy name, policy July, and the deployment schedule, as well as the pre and the post deployment settings. Let's click on save and continue. And our policy July has been created successfully. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that the creation of an automate patch deployment task is a two-step process. First, you create the deployment policy, and next you associate an automate patch deployment task with the deployment policy. Let's associate an automate patch deployment task by clicking on the automate patch deployment button. Here are the tasks that have already been created. Let's create a new automate task. We'll select Windows. We offer three different platforms, that is Windows, Mac, and Linux. Going with Windows. Now the first task is to rename it as always. Let's go with APD saved. We'll select the updates. As we already mentioned earlier, we offer Microsoft updates, third-party updates, as well as antivirus and driver updates. Selecting the updates based on their severities. We'll choose the critical and important ones for third-party updates as well. Obviously, you can choose as per your needs. And then we'll skip the antivirus. So here's a list of the antivirus updates that we offer. But do note that the antivirus updates and the driver updates are available only for the Windows machines. Now, the last step is to choose the deployment of the patches. So you can either choose to deploy the patches after n number of days from release or from approval. If I put in 2, this means that I choose to deploy the patches after 2 days from clicking on next. Here is the step to choose the deployment policy. You can create and modify a new policy by clicking on this button, or you can choose a policy that you have already created from the drop. I've already created a policy that's called policy July. Let's find that. All right. Okay. Let's find the policy that I've created. Right. It's taking too long for me. Let's go with the policy that I've already previously created. All right. Here's the brief for that policy. We can see the preferred weeks for deployment as well as the days and the deployment week. Now we have the option to suspend the task after a number of days. That is a particular date and the time. So why is this option used? So let's say you have remote machines, that is remote workers working remotely. Now you create an automated patch deployment task for them, especially for them. Now, if they come back to the organization after, let's say, 2 to 3 months, you won't be needing this automated patch deployment task. In that case, you can just suspend the task by putting in the date and the time. That being said, let's click on next and we come to define target. So now we'll select the targets right from here. You can choose in the local offices. You can also choose to exclude some computers by clicking on the filters and then using the exclude target option to exclude domains or OUs or groups as well as computers. Clicking on next, and the final option, that's the final step, is to choose to configure the notifications. So if you choose to notify, if you choose to get notified about the download and the deployment failure after every n number of hours, you can just click on the checkbox and specify the n number of hours. You can also attach failure reports with these mails. We offer 3 different reports: PDFs as well as CSVs as well as XLSX. You can just put in the email addresses right here. And if you have already configured the mobile application, you can just select the technicians from here. Click on save and our automate patch deployment task has been created successfully. So to quickly sum up, the creation of an automate patch deployment task is a 2-step process. The first task is to select the applications. You can select them based on their severities. Next is to choose the deployment policy. So you can either go with the regular split or manage engines exclusive based on patch Tuesday split. Number third would be to define the targets. You can also exclude targets using the exclude target filter. And the last step is to configure the notifications. So you can also attach detailed reports about the deployment downloads and failure. And we, as I already mentioned, we support 3 different formats of reports, that is PDF, XLSX, as well as CSVs. Now, dear guests, let's have a look at another feature of Manage Engine's Patch Manager Plus, as well as all the other patch management solutions. This is the filtering out of Patch Tuesday updates. Let's head on to the console to show you. Let's say that you want to take a look at the patches that have been released on a particular day, or let's say the Patch Tuesday. For that, we'll go to Patches, and then we'll open. Let's go with the supported patches view. This includes a list of all the patches that are supported in your network as well as the superseded patches. We'll click on filters and we'll click on the plus button. You can rename the filter if you want. We'll select the criteria as scrolling down and we'll go with the release date. Criteria would be is and a custom date. The custom date would be the date of the patch Tuesday of the day when the patches were released for this month. That was 13th of July 2020. So if we click on apply, once the filter has been added successfully, you can see a list of all the patch Tuesday updates that were released this month. Now you can also use this filter to check for the patches that are missing and were released on a particular date. Just go to any of the views. For instance, we'll go with missing patches. We'll add a filter by clicking on the plus button and selecting as usual as the release date. And we'll go with today. Let's see if any patches that were released today are missing in our system. applied the filter, and we see that no patches are missing that were released today. Okay, coming back, let's take a look at the declining of patches. Now, what is this decline patches feature? Now, many a time, there arises the need to decline certain applications. Let's say you don't want to deploy less critical patches to your machines, but if you choose to ignore them, it will eventually end up affecting the system health compliance. Also, certain applications running on other software such as Java might be unsupported with the latest updated version. For scenarios like this, Manage Engine Patch Manager Plus brings the exclusive decline patches feature. So let's take a look at the decline patches feature. From our console, we'll click on patches from the top menu, and then we'll select on decline patch from the left pane. Here are the groups that have already been created to decline specific patches. You go ahead and create a new decline patch. So the first step is to choose the custom group. You can create a new custom group as I showed you earlier by clicking on this plus button, or you can add an already created group from the dropdown. Next is to choose the patches. As you can see, we offer the declining of patches as well as applications and families. Let's go ahead with selecting the patches to decline. We'll click on the add patches, and I'll be selecting the patches. I'm choosing random patches and for demo purposes, but I sincerely hope you guys don't do that. Next is we can also decline entire applications. We'll click on the applications tab and we'll click on the add applications button. Let's go with able word, and let's find my favorite Adobe. Okay, can't find my Adobe. Let's go with this. Here's Adobe. So applications added that need to be declined. And lastly, we can also decline entire families. Choose add family to decline menu, and then we'll go with some random families. Let's go with X, added it. And so we'll click on next. So here are the summary details. So as you can see that 9 patches, 6 applications, and 6 families have been declined. Save that, we'll just click on save. And as you'll be able to see, our decline patches group has been created successfully. Now, dear folks, on your screen, you can see the solutions that Manage Engine offers for seamless patch management. Starting with our flagship product, we have Endpoint Central, which is essentially an unified endpoint management and security solution. We also have an MSP version of the product. We have Patch Connect Plus that smoothly integrates with SCCM and Intune to ensure third-party patching. We have Manager Plus that you can use to scan and mitigate the vulnerabilities and the compliance issues in your network. And lastly, we have Patch Manager Plus, our standalone patch management solution to ensure seamless patching across the network. Now, we'll be answering questions. If you have any questions regarding the webinar, the presentation, or any of our products, please feel free to ask via chat. Our expert panel, as well as myself, will try to answer all of the questions as much as possible. So Mr. Ronit asks, how do we do a DB sync? So if you are using the on-premises version, let's show you how to do a DB sync. Go to the console, and to do a DB sync, you just have to choose the patches menu from the top menu, patches option, and then you can see the update vulnerability DB. As you click on the update now option, the patch DB would be automatically synced and updated. Mr. Gary asks, will this presentation be available offline? Yes, Mr. Gary, the webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available in 1 to 2 working days on the Manage Engine site. Also, we'll be sharing a slide deck link of the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Ronit. Glad that we could be of help. Dear guests, if you have any more queries, please feel free to ask. Thanks to you as well, Mr. Gary. Have a good day. Dear folks, I repeat again, if you have any queries, please feel free to ask via chat. We'll be trying to answering as many questions as we can. Okay, so we have got a question. Where can I find the recorded webinar? All right, the recorded webinar will be available in Manage Engine site. We're also sharing the link for the page where you can find the recorded webinar. So Mr. Denzel asks if the patches are being provided from us. Yeah, the patches have been provided by manage. The patches are being provided by the vendors, but Manage Engine's external patch crawler, as well as our architecture, checks for the functional feasibility of the patches before they are being sent to the console. If that answers your question, if you have further questions, please feel free to ask. I've got a question wherein Mr. Ruben says, where can I download the patch ID 105979? I don't see it in the portal. Mr. Ruben would like to tell you that please check for the patch ID again. And in case if you don't find it, our support team will be glad to help you out. You can please reach out to your support team for any assistance 24/7. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll try to answer as many queries as possible. But in case we miss your queries, please be assured that we'll take up the questions and we'll be answering them in the next Patch Tuesday webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be closing the webinar in a few minutes. But if you have any questions or queries, please feel free to ask via chat. As I already mentioned earlier, that if we fail to answer your queries in this webinar, be assured that we'll be taking up the questions and we'll be answering them in the next session.